And so you also worked as a SWAT hostage negotiator. How did you even fall into that?
On the bottom of my foot, took all the lymph nodes out of my groin, and then told me more than likely I would be dead in 10 years.
Yeah, it's an unintended workout, but I guess you don't need a gym membership when you're doing that.
He was a friend of mine, and the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming.
A tense exchange like that, did that take a toll on you?
Until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of...
Well, welcome back. We're here for another episode. Glad you guys joined us. Make sure you subscribe to us wherever you're watching or listening. Either version, the video version, the audio version. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Give us 5 stars. Helps us with the algorithm. Helps us grow this channel and provide more and more content that you guys are liking. So thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting this podcast. And my name is Mike C. And today we have a very exciting guest, and I'm looking forward to diving in. He's a really cool dude. He's been an NCAA Division I college basketball player. He's worked as a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a customer service manager, a SWAT hostage negotiator, a business owner, and a high school basketball coach. And he's also a cancer warrior. He's the author of the book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. His name is Terry Tucker. He's been featured in magazines like Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership. And in addition, he's quoted in the new book, Audaciousness, Your Journey to Bold and Authentic Life by Maribel Ortega and Helen Strong. Please welcome to the podcast, Terry Tucker. Terry, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Well, Mike, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, you have a pretty incredible background, and I want to start there. I hardly know where to begin just because of your extensive resume, but I want to start with your cancer battle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach when we lived in Texas, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe, and initially didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a couple weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately, or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received a call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma, which most people think of too much exposure to the sun. It affects the melanin, the pigment in your skin. Mine has nothing to do with sun exposure. I have this rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because my cancer was so uncommon, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center, probably one of the best cancer hospitals in the world, to be treated. And so I did. And they did surgery, removed the tumor on the bottom of my foot, took all the lymph nodes out of my groin, and then told me more than likely I would be dead in 10 years. Or excuse me, in 2 years. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And fortunately, 12 years later, I'm still here.
Wow. So are you over the cancer? Is it still present in your body? Are you fighting it?
Yeah, I have tumors in my lungs. In 2020, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, I found out my entire lower leg was full of cancer, and I had my leg amputated above the knee, and also found out I had these tumors in my lungs. And I've been on a clinical trial drug for these tumors, which is kind of interesting. It does nothing to the cancer itself, but the way cancer proliferates in the body is that it secretes an enzyme, a protein that kind of hides itself from your immune system. And what this drug does is go in and remove that protein, remove that enzyme, so that my own immune system, just like if you had a cold or a flu virus, could say, hey, this doesn't belong here. We need to go attack it. And my own immune system has been keeping those tumors stable for the last little over 3 years now.
Really? Wow. So how often do you get scans to check on the status of those?
I used to get scans every 6 weeks. I used to joke with my wife that I'm surprised she can sleep at night because I should be glowing, with as much material as they're putting in my body and stuff like that. But I get scanned every 6 weeks. Like I said, I was on this trial. The trial ended 2 years ago, but because the medication is helping me, the trial company is allowing us to continue with it. So I'm kind of my one-man study right now, one-person study, and now I get scanned every 12 weeks, just to give me a little bit of break. It seemed like I was being scanned every time you turned around. So every 12 weeks I get scanned to determine whether the tumors have grown or whether they've gone anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look great. You look like your energy levels are good. You look healthy. Are you feeling any symptoms from this, or do you feel well in general?
Yeah, I mean, this one of the reasons that this drug and the way it's given will not go forward the way it is that every 3 weeks I go to the hospital for about 6 or 7 hours every day for the entire week. So Monday through Friday, and I get this medication. I have a terrible reaction. I throw up. I shake violently. I have a headache. It's not pretty. And then I get 2 weeks off to recover, and then I do it again. And so I've been doing this 3-week cycle for over 3 years now. And from what I'm told from my study coordinator is people aren't willing basically to put in that much time, to take that much time away from their lives. And I'm like, well, even if this medication saves their life. And she said, yeah. She said, people, they're not willing to do that. They want to show up once a month, get a pill or, get a quick infusion and then go on with their life. I mean, I wish my life was like that, but it's very labor intensive to keep these tumors at bay right now.
Yeah. Well, I commend you on all the effort you're putting in and the work involved in maintaining. I mean, that's very inspiring just on its own.
Thank you.
Is it an IV or is it a pill you have to take? How is it administered?
It's an IV. It's usually infused over about half hour, 40 minutes or so. And I mean, you can almost set your watch 2 hours after I get it, then the reactions start. And it's just ugly. I mean, I kind of get sequestered in a room with a nurse who has, Demerol to try to stop the rigors, the shaking, and a drug called Reglan to help with the nausea and the vomiting. And they just give that to me. And usually over the period of an hour or two, it will settle down and I will calm down. But, I used to say I should have 6-pack abs with as much throwing up as I do and stuff like that. I kind of wish I did. But, one of my nurses, I had treatment a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, I wonder how many calories you burn while you're shaking and throwing up and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, well, I don't know. Maybe that's another study we can do. So.
Yeah, it's an unintended workout, but I guess you don't need a gym membership when you're doing
exactly right.
Wow. That's really something. Well, I want to switch gears here, Terry, because there's so much to discuss. You played Division I basketball. Were you a contender for pro?
No, I was incredibly lucky to play Division I basketball. I had 3 knee surgeries in high school. The first 2 were pre-arthroscopic surgery, so I have the large zipper scar on the outside of my knee, and was just lucky. I mean, very fortunate to be able to get a scholarship to play Division I basketball despite having that. And, I was not a great college player. I survived my college basketball experience, but boy, it was a whole lot of fun, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. Well, you played D1, so you can't tell me you're not good.
Well, that's just it. You wonder after 3 knee surgeries, I was able to play D1. If I hadn't had those knee surgeries, might I have gone pro? I don't know. My middle brother was a Division II All-American 2 years in a row, was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA. And then our youngest brother, I mean, we're all an inch apart. It's like I'm 6'8", my youngest brother's 6'7", he pitched for Notre Dame. And then my middle brother was 6'6", drafted by the Cavaliers. And then my dad was 6'5". So we used to joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on at the front of the church. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Or you were that nightmare guy that would sit
right.
in front at like a basketball game or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
And mom always wanted to sit in the
I'll
front
be-
row. It's like, Mom, we can't do that.
Yeah,
Everybody's going to be mad at us,
yeah, yeah. It's never a short person that sits in front. You've
Right.
noticed that, especially at concerts. Drives me nuts. I'm always behind the tallest dude in the entire arena.
Yeah,
You
really.
know.
Down in front, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so you also worked as a SWAT hostage negotiator. How did you even fall into that?
So I was a police officer in Cincinnati, and I guess maybe I should give you sort of the backstory because if you look at my resume, it kind of looks like a Super Bowl went off in a room. It's all over the place. So my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle, but my dad was an infant at the time. And he remembered the stories that my grandmother always used to tell, that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. And this was 1933. So, trauma medicine in 1933 was not nearly what trauma medicine is today in 2024. So when I expressed an interest in sort of following in my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to lead. That's not the life I felt I was supposed to lead. So when I graduated from college, my father was dying of cancer. So I had really my first big adult life decision. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I know you're dying of cancer, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail, or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding the backstory, my first two jobs were in business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And then when my father passed away, I made that pivot, became a police officer in Cincinnati, Ohio, and when they had an opening on the SWAT team, I put in for it and was able to become a hostage negotiator.
Wow. So did you work on the SWAT team like doing the raids and stuff, or were you just in the negotiating position when you joined them?
So it depended on what was going on what the situation was. It was interesting because I also spent 3.5 years as an undercover drug investigator, which is kind of funny considering I'm 6'8" and being undercover. But I would do a lot of search warrants, and so my fellow SWAT officers would be the ones hitting the door and things like that. So it depended on what we were going after. Sometimes we'd be going after a homicide suspect that we knew was barricaded, with his girlfriend in an apartment or something, and we would go along on that, and try to talk the person out. Sometimes, they didn't need negotiators, and it was just the tactical team hitting the door.
Wow. Was that like an adrenaline filled job every single day? Like just doing that and being in those intense situations, even if you're not the guy breaking the door down, just the fact that you're involved in that, in a tense exchange like that, did that take a toll on you?
I mean, it certainly is stressful. And, I trained with all these people, the tactical team and the negotiators, we trained together and things like that. So, I would lay my life down for these people. So when I'm doing a search warrant and I know somebody's kicking in the door and going through that door, I was always nervous because it was like, boy, I hope nobody gets hurt, and we were very lucky. The University of Cincinnati Hospital loaned us 2 doctors that would always go on the call-ups with us. And they had these huge backpacks. I mean, they could have done brain surgery in the field if it was necessary. So they were trauma medicine doctors. So we felt very comfortable if something did happen that they were there with us and we didn't have to call somebody and wait and all that. So yeah, it was certainly stressful. But the thing that grounded me was my family. I mean, there was a lot of times, whether it was a shift or whether it was a SWAT call-up, where it was like, hey, we're going out for a drink after work. Are you coming? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm going home. Because that's what grounded me. That's what made me feel better. That's what kind of allowed me to de-stress from whatever happened that day. And it wasn't going to get a drink. Because, I mean, first responders have a higher incidence of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, divorce, domestic violence. I didn't want to go down that road. I wanted to go home to what really grounded me as a human being.
Well, that's a really healthy way to ground. I mean, alcohol, as much as it numbs the pain for a lot of people, We know how harmful that can be and where that can lead. So to be able to go home and ground yourself with your family is a real blessing. I mean, there are unfortunately people who avoid their families for the exact opposite reason. So that's amazing, and that's a real testimony to your relationship with your family, and I commend you on that.
Thank you.
How long did you do that?
SWAT, 4.5 years.
Yeah. And what happened? Did you have enough? Like, why did it end?
No, I ended up leaving the police department. My wife has always been the primary breadwinner. She lost her job in Cincinnati and found another one in Houston, Texas. So, she had supported me in this endeavor. When she married me, I was a, suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday hospital administrator. And we'd moved to Santa Barbara. And there was a circular that came in the mail for Santa Barbara City College saying if you pass this course or take this course, you can apply to be a reserve police officer with any department in the state. And so, you can imagine that conversation at dinner that night. It was just the two of us. Our daughter wasn't born yet. And it was like, honey, I'd like to do this. Will you support me in it? She's like, yeah, take the course. I took the course, passed. I got on with Santa Barbara PD, and I would work my entire, my regular job all week, Monday through Friday, come home Friday night, put on my uniform, go to roll call, and work all night. And she tells the story much better than I do. Come home Saturday morning, and she said you would come home exhausted, but with this huge smile on your face. And so when our daughter was born and we moved to Cincinnati, I went to her again and said, look, I've been bitten by this bug. I want to do this full time. Will you support me in that? And she did. And she supported me, on a SWAT team and being a drug investigator and all the, getting shot at and things like that go along with it. So when it was time for her to have to move on in her job, then it was time for me to support her, and I had to get out of the department.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, a smile on your face. I mean, it's hard not to smile in Santa Barbara. That's one of the most beautiful parts of the country I've ever been to, and every time I visit, I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
Last time we were there, my son was like, "This place is so nice, Dad." I'm like, "Yeah, that's why we're here."
That's right.
Such a beautiful city.
It
I
is.
love it.
It is.
So we talked about your cancer, and a cancer diagnosis is probably one of the most difficult things a human can be faced with. And you're clearly someone who takes on fears and negative thoughts head on. And I admire that just about your story and how you view these things. What was the main driving factor that pushed you to keep excelling and striving for excellence in your life, even in the face of this kind of adversity?
I mean, I think I've always been that way. I played basketball in high school, played basketball in college, and I think one of the things that I learned from playing team sports, and for me it was sports, I think it can be whatever team you're on, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So I've always, it was one of the reasons I got on the SWAT team. Usually the SWAT team are the best officers with the best training and the best equipment. I've always wanted to be part of the best. So even when cancer hit me and, I had my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2020, it was, what's my purpose? How do I incorporate something positive in that? And I learned that from my father. My father was dying of end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s when they really didn't know how to treat a man with breast cancer. And they told him to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years. And I believe he did because he had a purpose. He was in real estate. He loved real estate. He actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, well, when it's my time in the barrel, so to speak, I need to have that purpose. I need to have something to do so that I'm not just concentrating on, boy, this is hard, this is difficult, I don't like this. No, turn it into something positive, and that's what I've been trying to do since I got cancer.
That's amazing. And there's a lot to be said for positive emotions. I mean, people who are in a negative headspace all the time, it's like illness just shows up in their labs, in their biology. Mind over matter is a real thing. To an extent. I mean, obviously there's limitations to that statement, but if you're in a negative headspace, that affects your cardiovascular system, your adrenaline levels, like all that. It taxes vital organs. It taxes your system. So just to be able to recognize that is great wisdom.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, when I was in the clinical trial, I was in it with other people, and we would get our blood work at the same time. We would, there's a thing called HIPAA, which prevents doctors from telling you who other people are and do it, but you can figure it out. We're all in the lab at the same time. We're all at the doctor's at the same time. We're all in the infusion center at the same time. And one of the women that was part of this was, I used to call her an energy sucker. I really liked her. She was a very nice person, but she was so negative. And you kind of had to take her in doses because she would literally suck the energy right out of you, suck the positivity right out of you. And even her sister, who I met one time, who used to drive her back and forth for her treatments, told her one time, I remember her sister like, "You're the most negative person that I know." And I didn't say anything, but I wanted to say, "Yeah, you really are." And she ended up passing away from her cancer and that. So you're absolutely right. I've experienced that firsthand.
Yeah, yeah. It's I've worked in different environments over the years in my life, and yeah, there's those people you encounter sometimes in that workplace situation, or we're just somewhere where you have to be all the time with other people, and there's certain people who just walk into a room and they don't even have to say anything. Sometimes it's just a sigh, and it just deflates any positive energy in that entire room, and it's like the worst feeling ever. And you don't want to like dislike the person and tell them to leave, but that's what you want them to do, right? It's the worst.
It is, and it's also a choice. It's a choice to be that way, or it's a choice to be positive. And I think it's also a spiral. The more you do it, the more you get used to it, the more your brain kind of buys into it, and that's what your life ends up being. It's just like hanging out with people. I want to hang out with people that make me smarter, that make me better, as opposed to people that, like you say, suck the air out of the room and suck the energy out of the room and are always negative and it's always about them and there's always drama. You tend to fall into that if you hang around those people. So I always suggest people be very careful who they hang around with.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who's a member of a country club, and he doesn't consider himself a country club guy, but the reason he likes to go there is there's a lot of successful people there. And he gets a buzz off just being around those people. It inspires him, it fires him up. He's a real innovator in his line of work. And this just fires him up and motivates him. It's just that energy he gets from those people. And that's why he goes there, just for that reason. And it just helps him in his own life. So you're right. Environment has so much to do with our ability to, be successful and just how we view the world and who we hang out with. So true. So true. And, I know you're somebody that has used your pain and your trials to grow and make yourself stronger, and hats off to you for that. Why do you think so many people today have the exact opposite response to adversity? We've talked about that a little bit already, just the negative response to something that's negative in our lives, which is probably almost natural for most of us. But why do you think so many people just choose to give up and lose hope so quickly?
I think they're afraid. I think fear is a huge part of this. I have seen people through my cancer journey that get cancer and literally turn their life over to somebody in a white coat with a bunch of initials after their name. And I've never been one of those people. I want my life to be based on the decisions that I made, not the ones I didn't make or that somebody else made for me. So I always am, I'm engaged with my doctor. Tell me why you want to do this. Tell me in human terms, not medicalese, because I'm not a doctor. And if it makes sense to me, then we'll do it. But if you can't articulate to me, and he's very intelligent, he usually can articulate things to me, but I want to know why we do it. What are you trying to get out of this? What's the downside? What are the setbacks? What are the side effects that I'm going to experience? And what are we trying to get? I remember when I when I had my leg amputated and I found out I had these tumors in my lungs after I healed, he said, I want to put you on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this fight. And I looked at him and I said, is it going to save my life? And he said, no, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said to him, look, I don't want to do chemo if it's not going to save my life. If the end result is I'm going to die, then I would rather die not going through all the ugliness that chemo does to you. I said, but I'll go home and I'll talk to my family. And it really did happen this way. It's kind of a funny story. So I go home and start telling my wife and daughter what the doctor wants to do. And my daughter's immediately, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, And so we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how we feel about me having chemo. And then after we're done, our daughter again is like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raise their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remembered when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I took chemotherapy not because I wanted to, but because my wife and daughter wanted me to, and I love them more than I love myself. And I know that was a little bit of a segue, and I just think people are afraid. They don't know what to do. When you say cancer, people are all like, oh, I'm going to die. Well, we're all going to die. But, can you take whatever time you have left and live? And that's where I think people, it buckles them. It's like, I don't have the result. I don't have the energy. I feel sick. I'm tired. Yeah, I feel sick and tired all the time too. But doing things like this, being on podcasts with people like you, allows me to sort of re-energize my batteries. And for me, that's a fun thing to do and why I do it during my off weeks of treatment.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. And you're so lucky to have a doctor who just works with you so closely that way, like as a team effort. Not every doctor's like that.
No.
Some doctors, I've met many in my lifetime that they don't want to be questioned. It's like, oh, you're putting this, I'm putting you on this medication because I'm the doctor. And no, you're right. We have to be advocates for ourselves. Like, no, why am I going on this? What's the benefit? And, if you don't like it, I'll go find another doctor. You can fire your doctor. People forget that, right? People think they work for their doctor. It's like, no, you're paying him, or, or your insurance company's paying him or her. And you have a say in your treatment. You know what I mean? You're a consenting adult. You can, you know what I mean? You have that ability. And so to just, blindly follow whatever the first doctor tells you if something doesn't seem right. There are great doctors out there, but there are some that maybe aren't so great. And so it's only fair for you to ask those questions. It's going into your body.
Right.
Yeah,
it absolutely is. And, and I remember one of the diagnostic tools my doctor used to use was a PET scan, which is basically injecting you with radioactive sugar with the idea that cancer cells have a higher metabolism. They will pick up that sugar at a higher rate. And so that's what will glow on the scan when you have it. And I was like, I was never told this by my doctor, but I thought, well, it seems like if cancer likes sugar, maybe I shouldn't be eating as much sugar as I am. And so I didn't go totally keto, but I really try to stay away, from breads and desserts and all that kind of stuff. And does that help? I'm kind of like you. I believe in traditional medicine, but I also believe in alternative medicine and things that we can do, for our own bodies to make ourselves healthier, to cut down on inflammation and things like that. I'm trying to attack my cancer from both sides, not just traditional medicine, which I have done, but also from the other side. And I'm very lucky because I'm at a university setting. So I have access to an oncology pharmacist. And I remember one time I'd read an article about DHA, fatty fish oil, which is supposed to be really good for your heart, that these 2 doctors in Portugal had done an experiment and found that DHA acted like a Trojan horse in cancer cells, that they picked it up and it killed them. So I immediately called my pharmacist. I'm like, hey, I want to do DHA. She's like, well, hang on, let me research it and see what we think. And she came back to me and she said, we don't want you to do it. And I was like, why? She said, absolutely, I'll tell you why. She said, you had a blood clot in your lung back in 2017. You're already on a blood thinner. DHA thins your blood even more. You would be much more susceptible to bleeding. So I didn't take it. I mean, that made sense to me. It's like, okay, that's probably not something I should do. Certainly don't want to stroke out or something like that. But
Yeah.
that's the information I want. Tell me why we can do this or why we can't do this, and if it makes sense, then I'll either do it or not do it.
That's great. I didn't even know there was oncology pharmacists. They're specific to oncology?
Yeah, and they manage your medications, and that's so important. As you're on chemos and trial drugs, and you're also taking Eliquis for the blood clot in my lung and things like that. So it's what can we do and what makes sense, and managing all those medications so they don't kill you while they're trying to heal you.
Yeah. And so you have access to that. You can call that pharmacist and get answers. That's some red carpet treatment right there. That's pretty cool.
Well, and people don't realize that. It's like, I mean, that was never told to me, but she came into a visit with my doctor one time, and it's like, oh, Christina, super. And, so now I can just send her a message. There's a portal through the hospital and say, hey, I need a refill on this medication, or I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And she's great about responding, and we'll go research it and say, yes, it makes sense. Go ahead and do it. Or no, you can't do that. You're on this trial. The trial forbids, doing this because they don't want to mess up the results. I'm like, okay, but she works her butt off, and I'm really glad I have access to her.
That's fantastic. You're very fortunate.
Yeah.
So you've talked about your family quite a bit and how they ground you and how they seem to be a very positive influence in your life. How are you a positive influence in their life? Clearly, you're impacting them. You're impacting me right now, and I just met you. You're a very positive individual, and you got a great outlook on life, and you got a great spirit and a great attitude, and it's infectious, and I love that. So what active steps do you take, or does it just come naturally? How are you a positive influence in their lives? Because I imagine you are.
I think I am sometimes, and other times, when my wife has to get up at 4 a.m. with me to take me to treatment, I'm like, just put me in a nursing home and be done with this. Get on with your life. I mean, we've been married for 31 years, and 12 of those have been spent dealing with my cancer. And I've never been in remission. I've never not been being treated over those 12 years, whether it was an amputation or some kind of trial or study or a drug or whatever it was. So it's just been a constant battle. And I would be absolutely 100% not talking to you. I'd be dead by now if it hadn't been for my family, for what they give me. And I try to give it back to them. I feel horrible. I mean, I'm in a wheelchair. There's very little that I can do. My wife takes almost entirely, she does everything, does the shopping, she does the laundry, she does, cuts the grass, she does everything. And then she works, and I feel terrible because I don't feel I'm contributing. That's never been me. So we just spend time together. We laugh, we do goofy things. We call our daughter who's married and, do funny things. I mean, we're very close as a family. And I know I'm part of this, but sometimes I just think, boy, you'd be a whole lot better off without me getting on with your life, because I don't know if this is living. I think in a lot of ways it's just not dying.
I mean, it sounds like living to me, but yeah, I can appreciate why you might feel that way, but it seems like you're very blessed to have the family that you do in your life. And I don't know if everybody would have that same pillar of a family behind them, dealing with the things that you've dealt with in life. So God's looking out for you, man.
No doubt. No doubt.
Definitely. So talk about your book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, Apple iBooks, anywhere you can get a book online. you can get it. I never expected to write a book, never wanted to write a book, to be honest with you. There's sort of, talking about God, there's sort of an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God has never talked to me and said, write a book. But I think what God did was put enough people in my path that were making the same suggestion over and over and over again. So I decided I would do that. And the book was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was really excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And Mike, she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? And I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. That was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media from college, and he said, what do you think are the most important things I need to learn to not just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help other. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time, took some notes, and kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the months that I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the 10 principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Wow. That's great. You touched on something, just having that purpose and living with purpose. That's so important. Like, that's what drives us in life. And when you don't feel that, life can, I think, seem so empty for people. I remember years ago, I had a dentist who was an older guy in another city where I lived, and he was in his 70s, and vibrant guy, upright, really healthy, took care of himself and enjoyed what he was doing. And, he said to me, I don't have to be here doing this, but all my friends are retired and, they play golf every day, and that's cool. But I don't want to play golf every single day. Like, this keeps me going. It was his own practice. He loved it and he thrived. I think he had since retired because this was many, many years ago. But it was that purpose. His practice was his purpose in life. He felt that he was put there to treat people, and he was an excellent dentist. And, he had found what his purpose was, and that's what kept him going. And that's why he looked so great, and that's why he was motivated and kept going. And when you don't have that, I think you can age faster. You know what I mean? Like, you need to live with that purpose. So important to be able to find what that is. And like you say, look for it and search for it if you don't know what it is. But don't just get up and go to work every day just because that's what you're supposed to do. Find that purpose. You know what I mean? That's what keeps us going.
It does. And I think a lot of times we tend to say that word purpose as if it's one thing, as if it's in the singular. And at least in my life, I think that word is plural, that its purpose is. That when I was younger, I felt my purpose was to be an athlete. And, I ate, drank, and slept basketball. And then as I got into adulthood, I really felt my purpose was to follow in my grandfather's footsteps and be a police officer. And now, as I'm more than likely coming to the end of my life, I think my purpose has shifted again and changed again. And I think a lot of people feel that their purpose has to be their job or their occupation. It doesn't. Your job could be over here. It's what you do to pay the bills, but your purpose is over here, and it's to paint or be a podcast host or be an activist or whatever you feel is in your heart. And I love there's an entrepreneur out in your neck of the woods by the name of Ed Milet. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. And he talks about the 4 types of people in the world. And he said the first group are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people in the world. People who don't find their purpose, don't even look for it. They don't know what it is. And then the next group he talks about are the motivated, where he said it's sort of a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. It's a life simply based on motivation. It's rather low level, but it works for a lot of people to have a very happy and successful life. And then the third group he talks about are the inspirational people, where the word inspiration coming from two words, in spirit. So if you're inspirational, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes if I'm giving a talk, depending on the audience, I'll tell that story and I'm like, all right, show of hands, how many people are unmotivated? Nobody raises their hand. Nobody feels they're unmotivated, you know?
Yeah.
And if you...
Or they don't want to admit it.
Yeah, if you believe what he says, most of you are unmotivated, but you don't feel that you are. So I want to be one of those aspirational people. I mean, I've got a long way to go, but that's what I'm trying to do. Can my life inspire other people to find their purpose, to live their life, to just do what you're supposed to do in your life? And I just don't think many people think about that. Why am I here? I love the quote from Viktor Frankl, and I'm going to mess it up, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor. He said, life is not meant to be lived in the abstract, that there is a concrete reason why we were all put on the face of this earth, and we almost have a moral obligation to find and live that purpose.
That's awesome. That's an awesome statement. Very powerful. And I couldn't agree with you more. So like, Terry, what is the first thing that you would tell someone who lacks courage in life when they're faced with like potentially daunting circumstances? I think that represents a large number of people in the world today. And if somebody's listening or watching this right now, what would you say to them with your past experience?
I'm going to give you a quote, and then I'm going to tell you a story. The quote is from Ernest Hemingway. That he wrote this in Farewell to Arms, one of his books, and it says, and I just went right out of my head. Give me 1 second. This is what happens when you get old. Here it is.
What's my excuse?
You're young. He said, life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So just like if you break your arm, when your arm heals in that area where it was broken, it's stronger than the rest of your arm. So are you. If you can survive the things that beat you to your knees, that break you in life. If you can survive those, you emerge stronger. And the story I'm going to tell you is a true story. It happened back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University. There was a professor there by the name of Richter, and he did an experiment with rats. And as soon as I start telling the story and I say rats, people always go, oh, you're going to tell a rat story. Yes, I'm going to tell a rat story.
No, I want to hear a rat story. So I'm weird.
Yeah, especially when I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Okay, yes. So he tells this rat story. So he took rats and he put them in a tank of water that were over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and he let them rest for a while. And then he took the exact same rats and put them in that exact same tank of water again. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Now think about that. The first time, 15 minutes. It's not like, your business is going to go under or you're going to flunk a test. You're going to die. Your life is going to be over. And the second time around, 60 hours, which taught me two things. And this is kind of the second part of the answer to your question. The importance of hope in our lives. That if we know we're doing the right thing, maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but more than likely, because nothing's 100%, you will get to where you want to be if you're doing what you need to do. And the second thing it taught me is just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. We quit, we give up, we give in long before our physical bodies are ready to give out, because we listen to our brains. When our brains say, this hurts, this is uncomfortable, I don't like it, stop this. I mean, don't get me wrong, Mike. I think we all have a breaking point, but I think that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever give ourselves credit for. And we quit long before we ever reach that breaking point.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I totally agree. So because of your diverse background and all the different things you've experienced and the different types of jobs you've had, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned working in the business world? You know, you've worked as a marketing executive, you worked as a hospital administrator. We didn't touch too much on that, but what are some things that you could take away from your experience in those positions?
You know, especially if you're coming out of school and you're kind of getting into that line of work, I would say understand that you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have all the answers. I wish I could remember who said this, but it talks about your life in decades. So when you're in your 20s, you should try everything. You should just try everything that interests you. And then when you're in your 30s, maybe dig into 2 or 3 of the things that you really find interesting that you did when you were in your 20s. And then when you're in your 40s, really dig into that one thing that you feel is what your purpose in life is. And then in your 50s, you can harvest from all the work that you've done. So if you think of life sort of in decades and not, what am I going to do this year? What's my goal for this year? But think about it in decades, it puts life into a different perspective. And the other thing I'll say is that I think it's incredibly more important to work for and with good people, much more so than what you do. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that are willing to make you better, stronger, smarter, whatever it ends up being, and work with those people. Climb that mountain together. And don't worry so much about what the thing is you're doing, whether you're making widgets or, you're providing this service or whatever it is. Find those people that you can grow with, that want to grow with you, that want to go on that journey with you. And I think you can have an amazing life doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I've had very stressful and very monotonous jobs that I never would have enjoyed had it not been for the people I worked with and the friendships I made from those jobs. People I still talk to, this is years and years and years ago, people I still talk to this day that have become, lifelong friends. And that's such a blessing. And that makes that job, the monotony of that job or the difficulty or the stressfulness of that job, it makes it worthwhile just because of the people. And I didn't dread going to those jobs every day because of the people I worked with and because I knew who I was on shift with or whatever. There's so much to be said for who you work with and not even just what you do.
Yeah, you're right. One of the nurses who cares for me today used to be a hospice nurse. And for those of your audience who don't know what hospice is, it's end of life care. These are nurses who take care of people at the end of their life. And she recently gave me a book to read. And the book was called Imagine Heaven. And it's a book about people who have near-death experiences. And so much good information in it. But one of the things that I took away from that is that no matter who the person saw when they died, whether it was Jesus or Allah or a saint or an angel or a friend or a relative, the one question that almost everybody was asked was, how do you treat my people? And, you go back to Jesus was asked, what was the most important commandment? Love your God, have no other gods but us. But what was the second? Love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what that second, that question was. It wasn't how many times did you cheat on your spouse or how many times did you cheat on your income tax or how many times did you embezzle from your company. That wasn't what they were asked. They were asked, how do we treat each other? How do we take care of each other in our lives? And I think what's really important from that message is relationships. If COVID taught us anything, it's how much better we are together. When we were all isolated, alcoholism rates went up, drug abuse rates went up, divorce rates went up, domestic violence rates went up. We're better together. And if you can understand that, and I want, I'm never going to be remembered, I'm never going to be important or famous, and I really don't care. But what I want to be remembered for is those connections, those relationships that I had in my life. And just like you said, when you were working, it's the people you worked with that made what you did important, that made what you did fun and special. And I think that what you just said is kind of encapsulated based on what was told in that book.
Yeah, that's interesting. That account in that book sounds very interesting, and it takes me back to Jesus's quote. When he's asking people at the end of life stage, or when they've passed on and they're standing before him, he says, did you visit with the sick? Did you feed the hungry? Did you visit the imprisoned? Because even if you did it to the least of mine, you did it unto me.
Yeah.
And so that just, again, stresses that importance of just how people are as a community and how we interact with the people around us. And we're not meant to be lone islands, just isolated everywhere. That's not what humans are. We're social creatures by nature. And that's great. Terry, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you making the time to hang out with us. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a blog / website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply it into your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. And this has been a great conversation. Thanks for hanging out, Terry. Really appreciate you making the time for us today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mike. I really enjoyed talking with you.
You bet. And that'll do it for this edition. Make sure you subscribe to us and check us out at MikeCPodcast.com. We're also on Instagram, and the handle is at MikeCPodcast. And until next time, we're out of here. Take care, guys. Thanks.
The Mike C. Podcast.